The House will come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll, and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our House chaplain and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Kincannon.
Let us pray. Loving God in heaven, we come before you today, asking that you have mercy upon us. For our leaders, I pray that when they are weak, you will give them strength. When they doubt, you will build their faith. When they are confused, you will give them direction. When they are unsure, you will give them wisdom. Strengthen their will that they may live in your way, and remind them often that they can do all things through Christ who strengthens them. In Christ's name I pray, amen.
Members, as we're waiting for folks to get logged in and have their attendance taken, remind you that our 2021 and 22 House lapel pins have arrived. Hopefully you see them at your voting location. This year's pin matches what's on your mask, and also the state animal, the American buffalo, and also it's the same mascot as a Southwestern Kansas high school powerhouse. Have all members had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance.
Okay.
Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill Number 2162 by the Committee on Elections, an act concerning census data relating to data used in adopting senatorial and representative district boundaries, conforming law with certain amendments to the Kansas Constitution, and repealing certain obsolete provisions. House Bill Number 2163 by the Committee on Elections, an act concerning elections relating to presidential preference primary election-related contributions by certain corporations and stockholders. House Bill Number 2164 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning traffic regulations relating to the duty of drivers approaching stationary vehicles, penalty of unlawful passing. House Bill Number 2165 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to antique vehicles, providing that all vehicles that are more than 35 years old qualify as antique vehicles for registration purposes. House Bill Number 2166 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to distinctive license plates, providing for the Braden's Hope for Childhood Cancer license plate, changing the requirements to begin production on distinctive license plates. House Bill Number 2167 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to license plates, permitting concrete mixer trucks and requiring dump trucks to display license plates on the front of vehicles. House Bill Number 2168 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to license plates, providing for decreased license plate commitments and costs prior to distinctive license plate production. House Bill Number 2169 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to distinctive license plates, providing for the Proud Educator license plate, decreasing license plate commitments prior to the production of plates. House Bill Number 2170 by the Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, an act concerning the Kansas Rural Housing Incentive District Act, permitting the use of bond proceeds for vertical renovations of certain buildings for residential purposes. House Bill Number 2171 by the Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, an act concerning economic development relating to the High Performance Incentive Fund, providing for the transferability of tax credits. House Bill Number 2172 by the Committee on Water, an act concerning water relating to the Division of Water Resources, the Department of Agriculture, modifying multi-year flex accounts, base average usage, calculation, and fees. House Bill Number 2173 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning taxation relating to marketplace facilitators, requiring the collection and remittance for sales, compensating use and transit guest taxes, and prepaid wireless 9/11 fees made on platforms. House Bill Number 2174 by the Committee on Appropriations, an act concerning hospitals, relating to rural hospitals, providing for grant assistance to hospitals in certain counties, prescribing powers, duties, and functions of the Secretary of Health and Environment related thereto. House Bill Number 2175 by the Committee on Local Government, an act creating the Dwayne Peasley Technical Training Center District Act. House Bill Number 2176 by the Committee on Local Government, an act concerning cities relating to the vacation or exclusion of territory or easements, providing procedure to challenge certain decisions of a city. House Bill Number 2177 by the Committee on Local Government, an act concerning municipalities relating to the dissolution of special districts and assumption of responsibility by cities or counties. House Bill Number 2178 by the Committee on Local Government, an act concerning cities relating to the vacation of certain blocks in the original town plat in the City of Americus. House Bill Number 2179 by the Committee on Health and Human Services, an act concerning the Kansas Dental Board relating to the practice of dental therapy, education requirements, scope of practice, providing for the licensure of dental therapists.
Introduction to original motions and House resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Resolution Number 6008 by Representatives Croft, Alcala, and others, a resolution urging the President of the United States to honor the last surviving World War II Medal of Honor recipient with a designated state funeral.
On H.R. 6008, the chair recognizes Representative Croft for a motion to adopt the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you to all my colleagues for the opportunity to be the voice for this resolution to honor the greatest generation. The greatest generation is typically defined, or generally defined, by an event, a single event, World War II. That event unified the people of this nation toward a common goal: freedom from tyranny. We had the front lines around the world. We had front lines here in America. Everybody played a huge role in for the freedom around the world, and we had heroes in both locations. But other things that the generation is known for is establishing the UN, for beginning the charge to globalism, and for building a strong military. And one last thing, it's known for having the youngest military member ever, 12 years old, also the youngest veteran. I think they deserve our gratitude. When I'm told, thank you for your service, I feel like I'm the one who should be thanking you, especially for those who came before and set the conditions for what we enjoy today. And the best I can simply reply is thank you for your support. So with that, could I ask, and because we're with our mask and everything, could I just ask that all the veterans on the floor in this chamber will stand up for our recognition? So to those who stood, thank you. So when people tell me thank you for my service, it comes with a lot of responsibility. The World War II generation fought and died for our freedoms, but they also set a foundation for us to be able to reach for the stars. President Kennedy once said, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live those words. There were 461 Medal of Honor recipients for World War II. There were 8 from Kansas. That's more than the number from all wars since then, all conflicts since then. There are only 2 left alive today. And that's what this resolution is about, is to honor the greatest generation by asking President Biden to lay in state the last World War II Medal of Honor recipient upon their passing. This is our way to publicly say and to demonstrate that we are grateful, we're thankful, and appreciative. We are one team and one nation under God. I want to thank you for this great honor to represent you today on this resolution. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of those that stood and all the other members in this chamber, I move to adopt House Resolution 6008.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries. The resolution is adopted. Representative, would you like your remarks spread across the journal? Without objection, so ordered. Motions of a previous day, the clerk will read.
House Concurrent Resolution number 5005 by Representatives Reichman, Finch, and others, a concurrent resolution honoring the hard work and resiliency of frontline workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas on March 13, 2020, President Trump declared a public health emergency due to the outbreak of COVID-19. Whereas COVID-19 presents a daunting challenge that our healthcare workers, food service workers, child care workers, transportation workers, and other frontline workers face every day. Whereas the state of Kansas has called upon our frontline workers to serve their state during this pandemic. Whereas frontline workers have answered this call and carried out critical work to protect the health and safety of our communities and minimize the disruption that COVID-19 has caused. Whereas Kansans owe a debt of gratitude to Kansas frontline workers for their selfless service during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the state of Kansas, the Senate concurring therein, that the state of Kansas honors the hard work and resiliency of all frontline workers who continue to serve Kansas during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The chair recognizes Representative Finch on the motion for HCR 5005.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. This was going to be the first resolution that we took up as a House, but we were not able to come to work that day. And I think it is important that we note that it was to be the first because of the priority that we place on our fellow Kansans and the work that they're doing throughout this pandemic. Frontline workers are called upon to meet our state's most basic needs. They are a subcategory of the classification of essential workers, and it's defined as a profession or occupation where more than 70% of the people cannot feasibly do their work from home. These are people who have to be out and about interacting with others in the middle of this pandemic. from first responders and healthcare workers like police, fire, EMTs, paramedics, doctors and nurses and dentists, to education, the teachers and daycare workers and support staff who ensure that our children can be educated even during this pandemic, food and agriculture workers here in Kansas. We saw firsthand how COVID could spread through meat processing facilities and how important it is to maintain the food supply even in times of disease. Manufacturing jobs where workers have to go in order to run the engines of production and keep goods flowing throughout our state and our country. Correctional workers, post office workers and mail carriers, public transit workers, and grocery store workers who we often take for granted, but think about how many people go through that checkout line every day and interact with those folks with very little in the way between them and someone who is potentially infectious coming through the line. Our fellow Kansans have exhibited bravery and courage throughout this pandemic. They have worked hard and gotten up every morning to go about doing their jobs. And so I ask that you would join with me in first passing this resolution and then standing to give them a big round of applause, because as brave and courageous as they've been, I suspect that if you ask most Kansans, they would tell you they're just doing their job. So, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of HCR 5005 in tribute to the hardworking men and women of Kansas.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that my words be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. House Bill 2072 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will remain on the consent calendar for the second day. The chair recognizes Majority Leader for a motion to resolve to the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The chair appoints Representative Eric Smith to chair the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, buddy. Be easy on me. All right, for the first item of business, we have HB 2022. For the purpose of carrying HB 2022, the chair recognizes Representative Troy Waymaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were no committee amendments. House Bill 2022, in current statute, the state of Kansas has two funds that are utilized for the plugging of an abandoned oil or gas well in the state of Kansas. One of those funds is named the Abandoned Well, Oil, and Gas Well Fund, and those are for the wells that were drilled before 1996. The other fund is the Well Plugging Assurance Fund, and those are for the wells that were drilled after 1996. Right now, the state of Kansas, in the testimony that we heard in committee, has approximately 5,600 abandoned wells throughout the state of Kansas. And most of those wells, in fact, mainly all of those wells, were wells drilled before 1996. Right now, if we would combine these two funds, well, we could use the funds in the post-1996 fund into the pre-1996 fund, the state, the Kansas Corporate Commission will be able to allocate $6.8 million to the plugging of those, to address the plugging of those abandoned oil and gas wells. Currently, right now, when the KCC approached the committee, they have about $3 million in the pipeline of wells that could be plugged. However, the balance in the abandoned well, oil, and gas well fund does not constitute them to move forward because it does not have that big of a balance. Also, in House Bill 2022, it also gives clarity to the Kansas Corporation Commission in regards to the definition of who is a responsible party of plugging an oil and gas well before it comes before the KCC for their choice to whether or not to plug those wells. This was actually a bill that was introduced last session and passed out of committee. However, as all of us know, due to COVID-19, it was below the line and we never were able to debate it. However, it was a coordinated effort between the Kansas Corporation Commission, the Kansas Independent Oil and Gas Association, and also the Sierra Club in working out a revised language from the bill that was passed out of committee last year to the bill that was submitted and introduced this year. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for any questions in regards to House Bill 2022.
Thank you, Representative. Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to compliment the good work of the Chair of Appropriations, all the members of the committee, and really all the interested parties in this bill. The chair did a great job of describing it. At the end of the day, Kansas has too many wells that are not being plugged. This bill will help us make progress on incentivizing those to be plugged. I think that's a goal that we can all agree on. So I will be supporting this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Helgerson.
Thank you very much. I have an amendment there. It talks about in line number 30 on page 5, the idea of several funds and strikes language. What I'm proposing is that we change that to fee fund, Medicaid expansion fee fund number 1 and Medicaid expansion fee fund number 2, so that we have 2 points of contact with Medicaid expansion.
Representative, you need to turn your amendment in to the clerk.
Amendment. It's just to recognize the idea of how many discussions we had on Medicaid expansion, and I don't know if we'll have any this year, but it'll still be out there for all of you to think about.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not an amendment for a Medicaid expansion, so appreciate that. I do have a couple questions if the carrier could stand for it. In the bill, it limits the persons that could be held legally responsible for the proper care and control of an abandoned well, and it lists out approximately 6, and there's a few subcategories. What happens in them subcategories where it names out the operator, the driller, the injectors, etc., if they go through a bankruptcy?
Well, I would have to first say it depends exactly what the discharge of the bankruptcy is in regards to that particular business. If they relinquish their license on the particular oil or gas lease, then that would possibly relinquish them as a responsible party, which would then fall under having those wells plugged by the Kansas Corporate Commission using this fund. If they still retain their license and they are the lessor of the particular oil or gas lease, then they would be responsible as defined by the responsible parties on page 7 of the bill.
Okay, thank you for that. The bill also would state that a person who plugs, replugs, or repairs an abandoned well shall not become legally responsible for the care and control of the well. Who is responsible at that point?
In regards to that question, the individual or the entity that would be responsible for plugging that well would be the KCC.
And bill also goes in that the bill would transfer all monies in and liabilities of the well plugging assurance fund to the abandoned oil and gas well fund, and it would abolish the well plugging assistant fund on July 1st of 2021. So obviously we have some initial funding going on setting it up, but the bill also goes on where it stipulates that it will delete the transfers from conservation fee fund and this general state fund, et cetera. So where do future funds for this come from?
Right now in current statute, the funding of the 2 funds that we currently have in place comes from either the conservation fee fund, which you had mentioned, also a demand transfer from the state general fund, and also from the licensure of oil companies or gas companies that are acquiring a lease and a permit to drill on a particular lease. This would, as you mentioned, negate that as of July 1, 2021, and this would be an operator fee funded fund as of that point. So there would not be a demand transfer from the conservation fee fund or a demand transfer from the state general fund.
Okay, that was all I had for the questions on it. I want to turn the clock back a couple of years. It was October 28th, 2017. It was the Turon Co-op was hired to spray a farmer's field just a few miles west of Cunningham, Kansas. Sprayer equipment was dispatched to the field, and it was operated by the co-op's employee. The field consisted of corn stubble, I'm going to say 3-4 foot high throughout, and it was roughly a 160-acre patch. We're talking a good chunk of land there. As the sprayer worked its way through the field, it came in contact with a kind of a rusty-colored pipe staying about 2 foot high from the ground. Now keep in mind the stubble is sitting 3 to 4 foot. From up there on the sprayer, you're not going to see this little rusty pipe standing there. But when the sprayer contacted the pipe, it broke the pipe. That pipe just happened to be a 3-inch rusty pipe that was connected to a gas well with over 1,200 psi of pressure. Fortunately, the diesel-powered sprayer the engine died upon hitting the pipe. If it not, we can imagine what would be the fate that afternoon with the diesel engine running that was suddenly injected with 1,200 psi of natural gas through a 3-inch pipe. I think you can all imagine that. In this case, special equipment individuals had to be flown in from Houston, Texas in order to shut down the well and properly cap it off. Costs for this venture were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. After it was all saddled up and the pipe was, it was sealed off, but questions started to surface of who's responsible for the expenses to get this thing capped off. The company that drilled the natural gas, that drilled the well, actually in the process of drilling it, hit a natural gas storage facility that was owned by Northern Natural Gas and was sued from damages from Northern Natural. Thus, the driller ended up in bankruptcy state. That was why the question there earlier. So they kind of walked away from it. The original driller, he didn't have any financial assets to speak of. So do we make the co-op pay for the expenses? Because they were the people that actually hit the pipe and caused the issues. But that would have caused a total bankruptcy for the Turon Co-op that the farmers out in that area depend upon. So the bottom line was, The well was not correctly capped. It was not marked. How could the co-op person have known there was a little rusty pipe in the middle of this 160-acre corn stubble? I actually brought in the KCC to help with the situation. They utilized the Well Plugging Assistance Fund to assist with the issue, and at the end, it all turned out good. But now that we're abolishing the fund, I know from personal experience out in that part and from the family farm that there are several more of these. And I just want to make sure we are properly funded and prepared when it happens again, because it's not if, it's a question of when. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Waymaster, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and by the previous comments that were made, this is the exact reason why we need to have these funds combined. Is because, as I mentioned before in my opening comments, we have 5,600 wells, at least that's what we know of, that are abandoned oil and gas wells throughout the state of Kansas. The post-1996 fund has only been utilized twice, whereas most of these wells, probably all of these wells, were drilled before 1996. And by the previous comments, the funds were used to properly plug that well, as the previous representative mentioned. And this is a reason why we need to have these funds combined and also have the clarity for the KCC in regards to identifying who is the responsible party and when the KCC should step in and use this fund in order to plug an oil or gas abandoned well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the House rises and reports, that it reports House Bill 2022 favorably for passage.
You have heard the motion by Representative Waymaster to report HB 2022 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. They do have it. Motion passes. The next item of business is HB 2026. Got it. I'm learning. The next item of business is HB 2026. For the purpose of carrying HB 2026, the chair recognizes Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments. Colleagues, House Bill 2026 is something that we've seen before, we've heard before, and it passed this body unanimously last year. House Bill 2026 would establish a certified drug abuse treatment program for certain persons who enter into a diversion agreement in lieu of further criminal proceedings. It also allows the district attorney to enter into a memorandum of understanding with court services or community correction services to assist with the supervision and monitoring of these persons who have entered into that agreement. You guys may be familiar with Senate Bill 123 that passed many years ago, which is currently the primary drug treatment program that exists for defendants that end up in the system. To qualify for Senate Bill 123 and to get state-sanctioned drug treatment, you have to have been convicted of a felony possession. Well, I think we all know the challenges that a felony can do as it relates to your record, your ability to get a job, your ability to find housing. The idea here is when people are first getting involved in the system, let's give them the opportunity to deal with their addiction. Let's give them the opportunity to do what's right, to turn their life around, to take care of their families, to take care of themselves, and to beat their addiction so that they can be free to become good citizens and taxpayers of the state. So with that in mind, Mr. Chair, I would stand for questions.
Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the carrier did a fine job of explaining the amendment. I think this is a good step forward in our move toward keeping people with drug addiction out of prisons and getting them into treatment instead. It should save us money on the incarceration side on the downslope. I think there's some concern about whether we have adequate funding to provide the treatment that would be required under this bill. I think that's something the Appropriations Committee needs to address. I think that the cart isn't going to lead the horse. If we're going to get the funding for this, we need to pass this and get it on the table so that we can get the funding and get people into treatment instead of sending them to prison. I would appreciate your support for the bill.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Owens, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can assure you that this bill has been studied thoroughly. We, through the Criminal Justice Reform Commission, have vetted it, have worked through it, and I can assure you that it's a pay for it now or pay for it later. This is an investment in the people of our state, in their families, and in their future productivity. So with that in mind, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2026 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Owens to report HB 2026 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. They do have it. Motion passes. All right, body, the next item of business is HB 2008. For the purpose of carrying HB 2008, the chair recognizes Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments.
Please continue.
House Bill 2008 allows the Attorney General, in consultation with the Native American Indian tribes, to coordinate training for missing and murdered Indigenous people with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, and other appropriate state agencies for the law enforcement agencies throughout the state. Body, we saw this same legislation during the 2020 session. It was brought forward by the distinguished representative from Sedgwick County, and it passed the House unanimously. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it was not acted on in the Senate. Murder is the third leading cause of death for American Indian and Alaskan Native women. In 2018, the Urban Indian Health Institute released a report providing a comprehensive snapshot of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in urban areas throughout the United States. This report shines light on the growing problem as well as the lack of data that is collected. Even with incomplete data and the known reluctance in reporting, 506 cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls were identified in 71 urban areas. And there are approximately 5,712 reported missing American Indian and Alaskan Native women overall. We heard very compelling testimony in committee last year and this year on this current crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and people across America, and the need in Kansas for jurisdictional coordination, communication, and education to address the crisis. There were no opponents, and the bill passed the House Judiciary Committee unanimously. Victims' families can face a patchwork of tribal, state, and federal law enforcement agencies to respond to a crime, and House Bill 2008 provides an important first step to address this issue. The passage of 2008 will allow Kansas to join other states in attempting to identify the problem and develop policies and training practices to impact this devastating trend. So thank you, and Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Victors.
Good morning, colleagues. First of all, the carrier of the bill did a wonderful job of explaining the bill. This bill was introduced last year, but due to the pandemic, it stalled in the Senate. Currently, in another role, I'm vice chair of the National Caucus of Native American State Legislators through NCSL. I have worked on this issue with other Native American state legislators across the country. In Washington, D.C., at one of our meetings, we heard from top officials about the crisis that is currently happening across the country. Let me share a few statistics of why this is important. More than 4 in 5 Native American and Alaska Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. Native American women are missing and murdered at high rates across the country and are murdered at more than 10 times the national average. In 2019, lawmakers in 14 states introduced at least 30 measures to address the underreporting, training of law enforcement, and data collection problems that make cases of the missing and murdered Indigenous women difficult to solve. 17 of those 30 measures were enacted in 2019 in various states across the country. This is why I'm asking for your support again, because this is a step in the right direction and will help raise awareness on this important issue. My colleagues and I are wearing red today to represent the blood of our Native sisters who were murdered and for those who are still missing, because we haven't forgotten them and we're trying to find solutions to this epidemic. Thank you, Chairman of the Judiciary Committee and the Judiciary Committee, for passing this out of your committee again and for allowing it to be heard today on the House floor. Please support House Bill 2008. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion, Representative Haswood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity today to speak to you all in support of HB 2008. This bill addresses the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, where we still have some of the highest rates of homicide, missing persons, and human trafficking. To this day, there are still Indigenous Kansans missing. I am honored to have volunteered on this bill last year in 2020 when it was first introduced. I offered my experience in the urban Native health to this bill, where I have personally contributed research to the National Council of Urban Indian Health in Washington, D.C. on topics of social determinants of health, houselessness, and human trafficking, which contributes to missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. Now, in 2021, I am a state legislature who can speak on behalf of my community, on behalf of the Indigenous students, population of Haskell Nations University and Baker University in my district, who all continue to fight tirelessly for solutions and justice for missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. When I talk about missing and murdered Indigenous peoples epidemic in Kansas, people ask me, is this really happening here? I tell them, well, Kansas is in the middle of the country, and it was named a hub for human trafficking in 2018 by the United States government. According to a presentation by the Attorney General and the Director of Human Trafficking, Education and Outreach, Kansas's geographical location, I-70, I-35, the Midwestern commerce, and exchanging points in Kansas make our state vulnerable to these horrendous crimes. One of the driving forces behind missing and murdered Indigenous peoples epidemic is the data and visibility of Indigenous peoples. A resource called Name Us is a public online database system by the National Institute of Justice where you can create a missing persons entry. In these databases, Indigenous peoples are often misclassified as another race. As of today, there are currently 696 reported missing American Indian, Alaska Native people in the United States. Many Indigenous families with missing people are often left with no choice but to take matters into their own hands. It's not uncommon for families to create their own missing persons flyer on Facebook or organize their own community search party because the data system is flawed and there is a lack of awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. There are many areas of issues that need to be addressed about missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, but HB 2008 is a great first step. Providing for the Attorney General to coordinate training for law enforcement agencies on missing and murdered Indigenous peoples will bring awareness to our officers who are often the first to respond to a missing and murdered Indigenous peoples case. Colleagues, I thank you for your time and the opportunity to ask for your support on HB 2008. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to commend the carrier of this bill for the great job she did explaining it. If my memory's right, last year this was the first bill she had ever carried, and she didn't tell me that until it was too late. So of course she gets to carry it again today so we can point out that this is really her first bill she's ever carried for a second time. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of this bill. As we heard in committee both last year and this year, this is a big issue. It was very concerning testimony we heard. We need to bring light to this issue, start addressing it and make some positive progress. And this bill, while the bill itself doesn't do a whole lot, it does bring light to it and starts to allow us to have these discussions to see what further we can do to address these concerns. So I would encourage you all to support House Bill 2008. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Curtis, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, that we report House Bill 2008 favorable for passage.
Body, you have heard the motion by Representative Curtis to report HB 2008 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. They do have it. Motion passes. This concludes our general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
Thank you, Leader. You've heard the motion to rise and report. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole recommends House Bills 2022, 2026, and 2008 be passed.
The Speaker recognizes Representative Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. The chair recognizes Representative Hawkins for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to House Rule 2311, I move that emergency be declared and that House Bill 2022, 2026, and 2008 be advanced to that order of business final action on bills and concurrent resolutions.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2022 by Representative Waymaster, an act concerning oil and gas wells relating to the State Corporation Commission investigation and determination of responsibility for abandoned wells, plugging abandoned wells, abolishing the well plugging assurance fund, and transferring all assets and liabilities to the abandoned well and gas well fund.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2022. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? Eric Smith votes aye. Representative Eric Smith. Representative Landwehr votes aye. Representative Humphreys votes aye. Representative Carlson votes aye. Representative Berquist votes aye. Representative Delberding votes aye. Representative Alcala votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Lehan votes aye. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 123 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of HB 2022, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2026 by the Joint Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice Oversight, an act concerning crimes punishment criminal procedure relating to diversion agreements, creating a certified drug abuse treatment program for people on diversions, providing for supervision by court services or community corrections.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2026. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? Representative Auerkamp votes aye. Representative Landwehr votes aye. Representative Nguyen votes aye. Representative Helmer votes aye. Representative Berquist votes aye. The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 123 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of HB 2026, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2008 by Representatives Victors Haswood. An act concerning the Attorney General, providing for coordination of training on missing and murdered indigenous people for law enforcement agencies.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2008. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote.
Like he hasn't signaled yet. I think he's still working on it. It's logged in.
Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? Representative Penn votes aye. Representative Berquist votes aye. Representative Landwehr votes aye. The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 123 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2008, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice recommends House Bill 2030 be passed. Committee on Elections recommends House Bill 2052 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice recommends House Bill 2077 be passed. Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice recommends House Bill 2029 be passed. Committee on Elections recommends House Bill 2053 be passed. Committee on Calendar and Printing recommends on requests for resolutions and certificates that requests by Representative Johnson and Kelly be approved and the Chief Clerk of the House be directed to order the printing of said certificates and the drafting of said resolutions. Calendar and Printing. Yeah.
Chair recognizes the Majority Leader to adopt the calendar and printing report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the calendar and printing report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Return to introduction of bills. Is there objection to that order of business? Seeing no objection, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2180 by the Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications, and Act concerning electric public utilities, relaying the State Corporation Commission approval of transmission delivery charges through electric rate proceedings. House Bill number 2181 by the Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications, and Act concerning State Corporation Commission, relating to electric public utilities, regional electric rates report to the Legislature. House Bill number 2182 by the Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, and Act concerning workforce development relating to education, establishing the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act, authorizing payment of tuition for students who are duly or concurrently enrolled in high school and post-secondary school. House Bill number 2183 by the Committee on Elections, and Act concerning elections, prohibiting the governor, the executive branch, and the judicial branch from altering election laws, limiting the authority of the Secretary of State from entering into consent decrees with any court without Legislative Coordinating Council approval.
Are there announcements? Representative Jerry Stogsdale will replace Representative Louis Rees on the House Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee today, Thursday, January 28th. Representative Barbara Ballard will replace Representative Elizabeth Bishop on the House Elections Committee today, January 28th. Representative Wolf Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to follow up on an announcement that was made last week about an event that's going to occur tomorrow, a Zoom event, following up on our work with civil discourse that was started last year. We had so much good work done with that. We're continuing it this year, and we'd like to invite everyone to register if you haven't already. Especially like to invite our new legislators to join us for this Zoom call. It will be tomorrow, 2 to 3:30. You can do it from the comfort of your home, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate Kansas Day to join this event. Now, if you, this will include legislators, some of our lobbying friends are joining, and we have other community partners from across the state. You should have gotten an email, but another one will be going out momentarily in the next few minutes, so it'll be at the top of your email to register. Once you register, then you'll get the Zoom link. If you have already registered and lost track of the Zoom link, look for an email from Brent Hill. This meeting tomorrow will feature Keith Allred, and he is the Executive Director of the National Institute for Civil Discourse. Hope you can join us, and thank you so very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kansas Future Caucus, we're going to have a quick meeting on Monday at 11:30 and 159 South, just to touch base on next steps and survey results. If you are questioning membership of the Future Caucus, you have not had to have help logging in. Thank you.
Was that a progressive commercial? Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to draw your attention to an invitation that you received to join the Labor and Working Families Caucus for a lunch and learn on Monday. Brett Fleshbar, the Acting Secretary of Labor, will be our speaker, and lunch will be provided. You just need to email your lunch order to Lauren at Let Us Feed You, and you can pick it up from her, and then the meeting or the presentation will be virtual, so you can watch that from your office or from wherever. So any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Representative Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House adjourn until Friday, January 29th at 8:30 a.m. pro forma.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.